Hello everyone, I am Maiara. I'm working with Professor Rosenfeld, who's also from here, from the University of São Paulo. However, he's in another campy that Merle has presented kindly. So I'm going to present this work. It is a part of my master thesis. Uh, and the focus of this presentation is not exactly the results of my thesis. It's mainly how we reached the method that we are using. We had to develop a method before we started doing my research. And it used a DSM, so I'm going to show how DSM may support us, like in linguistic analysis. It's a little bit different from what you have seen until now. I think it will be more of interest from people from the research area, from academia. But I really hope that you may appreciate also people from the enterprises. So, first of all, I'm going to provide you an introduction. It is more like the historic, how we reached that and what's the background. Then I'm going to show the problems that we're dealing with, the methodology to reach this method. Then I'll explain a little bit about content analysis because it's not from our area. I believe most of you are engineers too. So it's like a little bit of linguistics. The results we achieved, then acknowledgement and summary. So first of all, for those who are not familiar with design thinking, when you read in literature, you may find three types of design thinking. The ones that designers usually cite. Hello? Okay. So the first one is the one designers usually defend and go for it. It's design thinking as a cognitive style. It's how we think to develop a design. There is also in literature the design thinking as a general theory of design. It's usually used to deal with wicked problems. The one we are talking here is an organizational resource. So those who have heard of design thinking might have heard it like associated with IDEO and D-School. It's this one we are talking about, okay? So what is this one, the organizational resource? Actually, it is a flexible, creative, human-centered approach. It's like a combination of reasoning patterns, abilitative, inductive, deductive, and creative methods. And it deals with four principles: observation, collaboration, visualization, and prototyping, okay? It's usually presented in literature by means of methodologies. They are really big guides or small guides that have lots of methods that show how you should do design thinking, and you should choose the methods and perform it. What we want with design thinking, actually, we have seen lots of enterprises using it. It's like a new fashion, a new fad. We don't know exactly how long it will take to keep it. But people are using that. And we want to help enterprises to use that. We have found that enterprises are feeling really confused about using design thinking. They usually call consultancies from other countries, spend huge amount of money to do that, and they don't really know how to merge it with their design process. So we wanted to support them. How they get design thinking input in their design process so they don't have to spend a huge amount of money paying for consultancy. But first of all, how should we integrate design thinking with other processes, with the design process? It's complicated. We couldn't just get the bootcamp bootleg methodology and just merge it. Like it wouldn't be merging design thinking. It would be keeping the methodology from bootcamp bootleg. So what we had to do, we needed to find out what were the fundamental elements of design thinking to say that actually we were merging design thinking here. So is that okay? Okay. So we started to try to find out how should we analyze it. So we made a parallel with design process models. I think most of you are used to this literature. The ones, for example, from Professor Eppinger and Ulrich, they have a book, right? And what happens in the articles we may find in literature? So people usually use a lot of phases comparison. They just get lots of methodologies and say, of design process models and say, okay, the generic phases of the design process models are conceptual design, detailed design, production, and etc. And design thinking also has some work doing similar thing. They compare stages. But just merging stages wouldn't help us to achieve our goal. So we went down a little bit. So we saw methods. There are lots of methods in the design models. And also there are lots of methods in design thinking. So the difference is the methods in design process models are really consistent. If I say QFD, most of people here will know what I'm talking about. If I say DSM, I believe all of you will know what I'm talking about. But when we go for design thinking, they use really different and inconsistent nomenclature. For example, if we get like 5 different methodologies and all of them say co-creation, each one will describe how to do co-creation in a completely different way. So it was quite complicated for us to say, okay, let's use methods to make it merge with the design process models. So we went down a little bit again, and we achieved activities and tasks. There is little literature doing that with the design process models. Actually, we found some, and usually what the authors do is, okay, those are similar for me, there's no method. They just go and say, okay, most of design process models say that, and those are the activities. In design thinking, it's a little bit more complicated. Differently from people from design process models, they don't separate the activities, they just give methods. And the activities we may find are all embedded in the text. So it was quite complicated for us, and the texts were long and difficult to analyze. So while activities are usually systemized in the literature of design process models, here we find it embedded in the text, numerically expressive, and with no approach in literature to deal with them. So we started to use the hypothetical deductive approach to try to find what method would be useful for us. We tried a combination of content analysis and matrix-based methods. The content analysis supports us to extract text, to extract important elements from text. And the matrix-based methods helped us to deal with numerically expressive elements. So we have passed exactly by 28 iterations to reach the method that I'm going to present now, with feedback from linguists and engineers who deal with design thinking also. So I'm going to present what we are dealing with. First of all, okay. So first of all, content analysis, what it is. It's usually a way to extract things from text, to extract information. And it deals with the pre-analysis, material exploration, and a final analysis. Usually in the pre-analysis, we establish rules of cutting the text and codifying the text. We are engineers. We like to deal with numbers. We don't like to deal with text. It's just too fuzzy for us. It's complicated to compare. And here we codify the text. And we define what is the corpus we are dealing with. So I have lots of texts. What are the texts I'm going to use? Then, for the material exploration, we apply those techniques that we defined in the pre-analysis to the corpus. And finally, we process those results. So I'll explain detailing how we use that for our analysis. So our pre-analysis, we reached the corpus and the rules. Then on our material exploration, we reached a thesaurus, which is just a dictionary showing what is equivalent to what. Our analysis provided us a final DSM, and our evaluation showed us the fundamental elements of design thinking. On the pre-analysis, first of all, if we're going to use that with other theories other than design thinking, and I'll show how we did that for design thinking, we need to identify what are the textual element categories we're going to use. For example, when we read a text explaining about design thinking, we may find all those element categories. Methodology, which is the set of methods, the stages of design thinking, the methods and tools, guidelines, activities, tasks, and actions, resources, people, input, and deliverables. So, first of all, we need to structure what are we dealing with. After that, we need to define what are our target elements and what are our superclass elements. So for you to understand what I mean with that, in design thinking, our target elements are activities. We want to compare them, to include them with the design process model. And they are contained, in our case, in the design thinking methodologies, inside methods and tools. So they are our superclass element category. Finally, we defined our corpus. They are really extensive, and we have to deal with this data manually. So I cannot just analyze 1,000 methodologies. We limited that to 8 methodologies, really different. We tried to find authors from different areas, different backgrounds, to avoid biases. Finally, we went to material exploration. First of all, we needed to identify the superclass elements in the text. It was easy. Who have already seen here design thinking methodology may see that each page of the design thinking methods have the name of the method up on it. So okay, for example, in the bootcamp bootleg methodology, we have the method journey map. If we enter the text, I have an extract here. It's written, you might ask a user to draw a journey map and then explain it to you. We find here 2 activities. The user draw a journey map and the user explain the journey map to you. I'll just take, for example, the first one. We structure that within the structure of a subject, a verb, an object. So back to school when we use it to do synthetic analysis. Here we have subject, a user, a verb, draw, and the object, a journey map. We started to codify that. And I will explain exactly how we codified it, how we could say that 2 things were exactly the same thing to use the same number. So, I don't know why the number cut off, but it's written 942. We reached 942 activities within the texts. When we codified them, they were 193 actually, because they had the same codes. They were written differently, but they had the same codification. And in total, we had 12 different subjects, 21 different verbs, and 45 objects. But how could we say that a verb was the same thing of another verb? It was complicated, just keep it into synonymous, because there are really quite few synonyms. So we used a linguistic topic, a linguistic definition. So first of all, we got WordNet. It's a lexical English database, and it was our first source. For example, if we have a verb, the verb is generate. We have generate ideas, for example, generate concepts. If we see the synonyms of it in WordNet, we only find bring forth, and that's it. However, we might find also the word create, which we know has a meaning really similar to generate. How could we just make it in the same code? In WordNet, it says they are hypernames. What is an hypername? It's like a word that has a more generic meaning than that word. So we may say that if generate is a troponym of create, because create is a hypername of generate, they may be coded together. And the same thing is done for all troponyms. For example, generate and bring forth have as a troponym the verb develop. So all of them should be placed together in the same code. We did the same thing for objects. So, for example, I got one easy one, just for you to understand. If I had blue as an object, blueness is a synonym in WordNet. Color is a hypername. It means it is in the set of color. If you get this color as a set, as a set of things, you have blue. And also you have the hyponym in this case. It's not a troponym anymore. In the case of objects, it's hyponym. So we would have dark blue. It's a specification of that word. So we had as a basis WordNet, and we started to codify it. So every time we had a sentence, for example, generate ideas, it would become V7070 because the number of ideas was 70, and the number of the verb was generate was 7. Finally, we went to the analysis, and the first time we started to deal with that, mainly now that we changed it a little bit, this method, after analysis of one linguist, and we had to include every sentence that had this structure. Before we were filtering what had the same level of an activity. For example, generate ideas, okay, we agree that it's an activity, but you may find also like put a post-it in the wall. And we know it's really small in the set of design thinking. But for linguists, if we disconsider that, it wouldn't be valid. So we had to add that. And we achieved about 10,000 frames, 10,000 structures. So we had to deal with that. And DSM showed to be really useful. Actually, we were based in one example of Professor Browning, of his book with Professor Eppinger, that they use it in the Senate of the USA. So how did you use it? First of all, we assembled a DMM. So we established all methods from all authors, and we put every activity out there. Whenever this activity was inside this method, we place it 1 here. It's okay. And then we performed a few DMM operations. Actually, we just multiplied the inverse of the DMM by itself. So we achieved this. What does it take for us? It's really fun because actually we had to do 2 DMMs. First one, we didn't put methods, we put the methodologies. Because what was our hypothesis? Well, if something is fundamental to design thinking, then most authors must cite it, must say it among their texts. So, if it is fundamental, at least it must appear in half of their methodologies. Not the methods, because sometimes an author has 40 methods and say the same thing in all of them. We shouldn't account that, but we should account if different authors are saying that. So, first of all, we filtered it and just selected the activities that were appearing in more than half of design thinking methodologies. Then we used this analysis. So, first of all, in the middle, we may find how many times each activity appeared in all methods, not methodologies, methods this time. And then we could find out of here how many times they were associated with other activities. What means? When I'm doing a method, this method will be performed doing a given set of activities, and they're together. So when I perform an activity, I should be performing other activities together with me. And it eases our work, it make our work easier to merge the design thinking methodologies with the design process models, because we have now sets of activities and not isolated activities to merge. And finally, we went for evaluation, and we always pass through this evaluation by linguists and experts in the approach to see if it's making sense. And since it's a hypothetical deductive approach, we must make sure that it's not being falsified, it's working yet. And then we structure and analyze our final results, just for you to have an idea. Our work found this result. Basically, usually design thinking is divided in 4 stages, 4 main stages. We found 40 fundamental activities in the first stage, which is empathy, generation, and problem definition. 6 main activities in ideation, 13 in prototyping and test, and finally, in implementation, there was none. Which means it's because most authors in design thinking don't deal with implementation, although some say they do, but they don't agree what they're doing, so it's fuzzy. What are the limitations of that? First of all, it has to pass by experts' analysis, mainly because of the methodology of developing this method. Also, it was tested in the DT context only, this method, but we are testing now in the PSS context with another PhD student of our course, of our lab. And also it depends on the consistency of the authors in the area. Although design thinking authors are really inconsistent in some nomenclature, when they describe, they are quite consistent, so it's easy to compare. And also, for future steps, we are improving the method with frame analysis. So instead of structuring it with subject, verb, and object, we will use frames. So, okay. So, you may find in the internet a frame net, which structures how to say everything. What are the elements in your speech when you say anything? They have one frame for activity, how to describe an activity, which is this one. And in yellow, you may find what's core, and here the non-core. So for us, we would compare only what's core. And you may find it like describing even how to describe death. It's really complete. You may find everything. So we are improving with that. And we are now associating design thinking and PSS design process models by means of the fundamental elements of design thinking to help enterprises to use it. So I would like to thank FAPESP, which is who is funding this work, and also to the researchers of the Integrated Engineering Group, which is the group I work. And thank you very much if you have questions.